So, Norm, has the Supreme Court completely derailed all of the other Trump prosecutions?
Well, it's complicated.
I'm Asha Rangappa. I teach national security law at Yale University. I'm a former FBI special agent, and I'm a legal analyst for ABC News.
And I'm Renato Mariotti. I'm a former federal prosecutor, a practicing lawyer, and a legal analyst.
And I'm Norm Eisen, and I am a CNN legal analyst, a lifelong defense lawyer, and so excited to be joining my friends Asha and Renato for today's podcast.
And we're here to help you understand topics that can't be boiled down into a soundbite or a tweet. Okay, so we've had a week now to digest
the indigestible. We need legal Rolaids for this.
We need Tums. We need legal Tums for this. So I think this is going to be a great podcast because I don't know if you listen to this, Norm, and it's okay if you don't because you're very busy and you're doing a lot of important work. But Renato is known as the sad panda on the podcast. He's always like, wah, wah. And one of the reasons that I thought you would be a great guest is you are the eternal optimist, no matter what. And so I feel like this is going to be a showcase showdown in terms of what you guys both see happening.
Do you know how depressing it'll be if I agree with Renato on the prognosis? It'll be like a double down depression. But fortunately, I have a complex but a mixed perspective on the Supreme Court decision and the election and the fate of our democracy. So it won't all be bad.
Why don't you tell us what your impression is of the opinion itself? Renato and I kind of talked about it last week, but where are you now a week later on how bad it actually is and what is going to happen with the January 6th case? And then we'll progress to the other cases.
There's levels of badness to this atrocious opinion, which I classify really among the very worst in American history at Dred Scott, a Plessy v. Ferguson, or Korematsu. It's just completely out of sync with the idea of our country, our Constitution, to elevate a president in the untouchable absolute immunity for exclusive and preclusive acts, a little more sane, although I disagree, to apply civil, Nixon v. Fitzgerald, presumptive immunity that can be rebutted. Okay, you can kind of live with that. The good part of the opinion is, and I know I have a friendly debate with you about this, Asha, and most commentators, I think it sets up a fairly clear category of unofficial acts that can be prosecuted and will allow large parts of the January 6th federal case, the Georgia state January 6th case, to ride through. Certainly the classified documents case, almost entirely, in my view, untouched by this opinion. Whether Judge Eileen Cannon feels that way is another question, but the 11th Circuit will correct her if she gets it wrong. And the Manhattan case, almost completely unaffected by the opinion. There will be no new trial in Manhattan, and Trump will be sentenced in September, perhaps to a sentence of imprisonment. All of that is the legal meaning and practical implications. The last thing I would say is there's more to historic Supreme Court cases, good or bad, than just the doctrine. There's the ways in which they shape our society, our attitudes. They move the Overton window. At a time when Donald Trump is ascendant in the polls, threatening to implement Project 2025. I just wrote for Slate. Don't believe him saying he doesn't know anything about it. It's his real platform, not that like a one-page menu that they came up with for the supposed Republican platform. And him surging towards an autocracy in America, to have this signal of impunity goes beyond anything that's written in the case and sets up a very dangerous situation in our country. So there's a larger meaning that's negative, but we've faced large challenges before, and I think as a country, we're up for this multi-year struggle for American democracy, that this opinion is not very helpful.
If that was your mixed view, Norm, I can't imagine what the optimism would be. It would be like gumdrops and rainbows and unicorns would come out of the Supreme Court decision.
Well, I believe America's up to the challenge. It'll be a multi-year challenge. We don't know how the election's going to go. We know how the odds look today. And I believe that there's clear distinctions in this opinion, and unofficial acts can be prosecuted. Those are three gumdrops, rainbows, and unicorns. I got a gumdrop, a rainbow, and a unicorn for you.
Okay, maybe we should start, Asha, by talking about the practical implications of some of these cases, because you've named some of them. Let's start with Manhattan, because you're very bullish on that one. So what's your take on Manhattan?
Well,
I guarantee. Oh, Asha.
I want to hear the guarantee.
I guarantee you, no, Judge Merchan, well, I'm stepping on Asha's line, but Judge Merchan is not going to order a new trial in Manhattan, and the intermediate appellate courts, the First Department and the Court of Appeals in New York, are going to see it the way he does.
Do you think that any of the evidence, I mean, because there's two steps to this, right? Is any of the evidence now, in light of the Supreme Court's ruling, inadmissible? Like, is it something that the jury should not have heard because they relate to official acts? And I think here it would be his conversations with Hope Hicks, his communications director, and then maybe some other items that were put into evidence. Renato, you might know exactly. I think there were like government forms and things like that were filled out. And then the step two is if those are definitely at this point shielded or can't be put into evidence because they're quote unquote official, then does it impact the jury's determination? And I don't know what the standard is there. Like, is it harmless error, or how they would evaluate whether the jury would have still convicted, even had that not been admitted. So
the way we talked last week about the evidentiary ruling, I think both you and I, Asha, were of the opinion that was really the biggest problem that we both had with the Supreme Court decision, was the evidentiary piece, where they basically said you can't use what the president's official acts, which could potentially include tweets, as evidence of his intent, motive, and so on, as to other things that were not official acts, that were criminal activities. And here, the main piece, I think the most important one, is going to be the testimony of Hope Hicks. That I think is going to be where a lot of the battle lines are drawn. But there was also some tweets post-presidency, particularly about Michael Cohen, that were introduced. And the analysis would be, in the first instance, were those pieces of evidence official acts? Are they sort of tied in with official acts? Were they done as official acts of the president? But then the second thing is, like you said, a harmless error analysis, where essentially was the weight of the evidence so overwhelming that the verdict was not really impacted or would stand anyway. Is that your perspective on that, Norm, in terms of how the legal analysis would play out?
I would add another layer to the structure. Because if Trump waived these arguments, then you don't get to present them. And he, out of time, he blew a deadline. He failed to raise these issues, of which he was well aware. And the proof that he was well aware is he filed late a pleading laying out these evidentiary issues, even though it was before the Supreme Court decided. It was well into the litigation. The issues were well known. So there's a very significant, and then in my view, they had opportunities to raise it again during trial. They didn't object. So in my view, the courts, even the Supreme, how many people has the Supreme Court executed because their lawyer missed the deadline? That's even more grave than admitting a presidential tweet into evidence, that constitutional sin. So number one, waiver. Both of you, different ways. Asha, the cases you worked on, the investigations that you did. Renato, you and I know this painfully. We've seen other lawyers do it. Thank God it's never happened to me. It's a big deal when you blow deadlines, and they did it repeatedly, Trump's lawyers. They also should have raised these issues on federal removal, where they litigated immunity issues. They lost, and they abandoned their appeal. So there's multiple layers of waiver. That's point one. Point two is the substantive analysis. You know, the Hope Hicks conversation is post-presidential, but it's about non-conclusive and preclusive presidential powers. It's not about the core presidential activity that is entitled to this highest degree of protection under the opinion. The conversation that Asha is referring to, which I agree is the most serious, or Renato, you referred to it, it's the most serious of the arguments. It's a conversation where Hicks and Trump are discussing a non-governmental person, Michael Cohen, who has no official role, and they're reminiscing about this hush money payment and what it would have been like if it came out during the election. So it's in that middle category, or the third category of, I think it's an unofficial conversation. So in the end of the day, even if you do the analysis, it's just not enough. And then you come to harmless error. This is really the one conversation that raises an issue. It does not erase on a harmless error analysis the weight of the evidence in the case. So I think they're screwed 3 times over. Mershon is going to say so. You're not going to get a new trial, and it's going to then take months or years to work its way through the New York appellate system. And they'll agree with Mershon.
Is there any way he can skip over? I mean, it's a federal question, I guess, right?
Yeah. It's not going to be so easy. It's already, the deck is stacked against him at the Supreme Court.
What?
If he comes up with if he comes on this issue, it is stacked against him. If he comes up with, because it's such a stretch, if he comes up, even this corrupt court, he's probably going to lose when it gets there. But if he comes up with some funky procedural way, the normal way things come to the court, the judge decides, then the state intermediate appellate court, then the state Supreme Court. I'm skipping all of that. I want to come directly to y'all. It makes it even worse. I just don't think of all the criticisms that you can make. And I wrote a CNN op-ed about this, and I'm going to write another one. I wrote one this week with Tim Parlatore, Trump's former lawyer, about, although Tim is, I think, a conservative, so Tim's perspective is that my and your hand-wringing about the opinion is a little too strong. We found common ground on the opinion is not going to knock out these other cases. We really focused on the Mar-a-Lago documents case. So he comes at it from wanting to cabin the outcry about the court a little bit, I think. He's one of my favorite conservative lawyers to debate with.
Can I just put a marker down on the New York case? So here's what I'm going to say about the New York case. I agree that Judge Merchan is not going to want to try this case again. He's done with the case. And like most trial judges, he's going to definitely find a way to just move this forward and get it off his desk. But I would not be surprised if eventually an appellate court has a different view. If that happens, though, it's going to be so late in the game. Trump will either no longer be president, and the election's over, or not be president. No longer be running for president. The election will be over, or he'll be the president. In which case, God knows.
We'll be seeing Merchan on the televised show trial along with Liz Cheney, apparently.
We'll all be. Yeah.
Okay, so the argument in Mar-a-Lago is that at the time that the documents were purloined from the White House and Washington, D.C., Trump was technically still president. Hence, they really weren't purloined. And I think that there would be some kind of jerry-rigged fruit of the poisonous trees type of application, that everything that flowed from that. I mean, look, I know I'm making up law here, but so did the court. So I'm giving the argument. If I'm Trump's lawyer, that's the one. That's what I would say.
Where's your black robe? Where's your black robe, Asha? And your little lace
My
collar.
lace collar.
I'd much rather have Asha on the Supreme Court than about 5 of them that I could name. No, I think that the Mar-a-Lago documents case is a document retention and obstruction of justice case. It's not a document removal case. Some of the allegations in the complaint will have to go out, but they actually point, I think it's paragraph 4 of the indictment. I think it's paragraph 4 of the indictment where they draw a line. Trump ceased being president at noon on January 20th, 2021. And the actual criminal allegations are all for the noon and 1 second period. So you have to strike some allegations in the complaint. It's a little weird. You're not going to explain to the jury how he got the documents, but you don't have to. You just have to establish that at some point they were in his possession. It's like a chain of custody case. You pick up the chain of custody at 12:01 p.m. and you go from there. I think that I can easily see, Renato, you and I have spent so much time in front of juries. Like, sometimes you just have to do that. The judge, you get a motion in limine, and the judge says, look, you can't talk about X event. Frame the whole case. And it feels weird to those of us who live with the full picture, but we just shape the jury argument and the order of proof to those parameters.
What if he claims that he unilaterally declassified them?
Well, that's his defense, right? He can waive those constitutional privileges. Tim and I write in our CNN op-ed that it's weird that he's actually wants to cut off with this motion the post-presidential period. He wants to cut off the presidential period because it seems so important to his defense. So, maybe he'll say, oh, no, I only want the prosecution can't talk about that. I want to talk about it. But that then, of course, opens the door for the prosecution to do it. So it's not an essential element of the prosecution case, of an indictment, of a jury argument, to have to talk about the forbidden official acts. I don't see it. Judge Cannon might reach, let's hope she's not listening to this podcast. She's writing down fruit of the poisonous tree analogy. But I just don't see it.
Well, I can't imagine she's watching our podcast.
We're kind of mean to her on the podcast.
Maybe she's a hate watcher like Trump.
So, well, I'll hear. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of have my usual sad view because I know we have to wrap this up because we got another important discussion. I think, Norm, you're right that you could have a trial in which you didn't really discuss anything that happened during the Trump presidency in the Mar-a-Lago case. I agree with that. And you're right that we had those trials all the time. I mean, when I was a baby prosecutor, we had all sorts
They're
of,
so weird.
you'd have these gun cases and you couldn't talk about what happened before the guy was found with a gun. You couldn't discuss the fact he just murdered somebody, but he was there with a gun. And there you go. But yeah, I hear you, and you could totally do that. But I think everybody here, and I won't believe Norm if he's so optimistic he doesn't believe this. Everyone here knows that Judge Cannon is not going to come to that conclusion. In fact, she's going to find that she's going to look at Justice Thomas's dissent. She's going to find that the whole case shouldn't have been brought because Jack Smith is not actually a constitutional officer or whatever she's going to say about that. He's not properly funded or whatever. And she's going to say that, there's the immunity, the fact that it's going, that the evidentiary issues regarding what happened during his presidency are inextricably intertwined with the indictment, and there's not enough left if you cut him out or whatever she's going to say. And it won't, just like I said with Merchan, I mean, in the Merchan one we're talking about a moment ago, I think it almost doesn't matter what the appellate court does. As long as Merchan just rules, by the time the appellate court gets to it, it's going to be kind of late in the game. I feel like it's going to be the same way in the opposite direction for Cannon. Cannon's going to say what she's going to say, and is the 11th Circuit are going to really rule anytime soon? And by then, Trump could be president and could just order Jeffrey Clark to dismiss the case or something along those lines.
I know we have to end, but I think Judge Cannon has been so careful not to
make a ruling,
issue any rulings that get any rulings, period, but any rulings that get the case to the 11th Circuit, like either of these grounds would, because Smith will fight. There's a strong 3 strikes and you're out rule for biased judges in the 11th Circuit, repeated pattern of bias towards one party. And her bias has been so outrageous. Once you have a procedural vehicle to say, oh, and 11th Circuit, by the way, I mean, it's so shocking what she's done. They know it. We know it. Everybody knows it. So she may just slow roll, though. She's already slow rolled the case into 2025. And this just gives her more jelly for her role.
Yeah. Let's wrap a real quick hot take. I mean, are we even talking about Georgia anymore? I don't even that's just a hot mess. I know it's paused because there's the appeal on whether Fani Willis should be disqualified. But I assume that even apart from that case is one where it's kind of a hot mess if you start taking into account potential official immunity and stuff. And it was not waived there.
Asha, you're such a pop culture fiend, Midnight Train to Georgia. We took this case. This case was the midnight train that left Georgia. So we were on the midnight train from Georgia. And that's not a 2024 topic. Tragically.
Whew. Okay.
Yeah, that's just life. Well, but what you will get, the one thing we didn't cover is, I do think when the Supreme Court issues its judgment another few weeks, you will get a mini trial in D.C. on the, as the Supreme Court basically instructs Chutkan to do, apply our test. What part of this indictment is official? What part is unofficial? Can, on the mix, the middle category, can Jack Smith rebut any presumption of immunity? I think he'll slash back his indictment a little bit. So we will have a little action in D.C., I think, before the election on immunity or not. To be immune or not to be immune, that is the question. I guess it's to be official or not to be official. That's the actual question.
That is the question.
So, Norm, one thing that Asha and I have been talking a lot about is, was it Project 2025?
Yes.
I think everyone's been talking about it. It is such a big topic. I think it's become a central issue really in this presidential race. And a lot of people are talking about what practically would Trump do or could Trump do legally, and what are the potential checks? I mean, you're our optimist. So tell us how our institutions are going to save us, or Captain America, or whoever's going to save us from this. Iron Man.
First of all, well, it takes more than one. We need at least the Fantastic Four, if not the entire Justice League of America. First of all, let the record reflect what a good guest I am. I inadvertently teased the B block of the podcast in my answer to the A block.
You did.
I think that the Project 2025 plan, which Trump embraced before he realized that he had said the quiet part out loud, but it's staffed by all his former and current and future people, and it embroiders his opinion. For God's sakes, the Heritage Foundation, I keep seeing these pictures which produce Project 2025, like their logo is all over the gateway to the Republican convention. They're like advertising the authors of Project 2025. Trump has praised Heritage, has praised Kevin Roberts, the head of it, who fobbed this misbegotten abomination of a plan to turn America into an autocracy. They're going to shut down large swaths of the government, authorize the unitary executive. They're going to cut off what's left of federal protection for choice, eliminate funding for our kids' education. I mean, it's a nightmare scenario. And above all, empower the president, which in turn will allow him to go after his enemies. It's really the full, if you want to know what Project 2025 looks like, what Trump's next administration would look like, look at the autocrats and dictators around the world. Orban in Hungary, Erdogan in Turkey, Putin in Russia. It's somewhere along the, Trump falls somewhere along that spectrum. Now, the problem for Trump is... Can I
ask a question?
Yes. Can I answer I know it was an excessive prologue, but I'll answer the original question before you jump in. The problem for Trump is that he's not just going to slice through all of American checks and balances like a knife through butter. There's still judges. There's a lot of Trump judges. There's still a constitution. There's still rule of law. There's still state legislatures. There will still be non-Trumpers in Congress and in the states, governors, mayors. So there's going to be, if he tries it, there's going to be a massive pushback and a peaceful pushback. And I believe that ultimately that will succeed.
Could he declare that there is an invasion at the border and suspend habeas corpus? This would be the precursor to the rounding up of Merchan and Cheney and us and all that.
And this podcast. I mean, we'll be doing our podcast. It'll be the number one podcast from Guantanamo. We will be the best. Today's special guest, Justice Juan Merchan. I think that I don't think the courts will let him suspend habeas corpus, and I don't believe that he'll defy that court order. We'll have bigger problems. We'll have gone right to Putin if he defies court rulings, and in that event, there'll be hell hath no fury like an America losing
the right to
our
habeas
freedoms.
corpus.
I mean, you'll see. Well, people will understand that what he's doing is arresting people illegally, and that this is like darkness at noon. It's like Stalin. It's like Arthur Kessler. It's like Putin, actually. People will get that. I don't think, Asha, you're right to ask the question. I don't think if you study those other autocrats, Turkey, Hungary, even Russia, Putin's initial moves, they take a while to boil the frog. And I don't believe that he's going to go right to dictatorship DEFCON 1. I think that it will be a process. I think it will be a process. If I've got my DEFCON numbers right, he'll start out. We're already, I think the DEFCON 5 is the lowest level of DEFCON, right? So we're already we're not even, after the debate, we're at DEFCON. You got to leave some room for cream in your coffee. We're already at DEFCON. Don't go to DEFCON 3 yet. We're at DEFCON 4. We'll see what happens, what unfolds after the debate. We're at DEFCON 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let me just, for our listeners, because we try to explain the legal concepts we're talking about, the reason I'm asking about habeas corpus, that is basically suspending. That means that if you got rounded up in a black van in the middle of the night and thrown into a dungeon, there would be no recourse for anyone to go into court and even find out the reason that you're being held. So it's kind of the fundamental bulwark of liberty. It's kind of the thing that goes when the roundups begin, kind of.
It's an ancient one, habeas corpus. It means Latin. It means present the body, and it's a legal remedy for unlawful detention that we absorbed with Anglo law, with English law at the time of the Declaration of Independence and the Revolution, indeed beforehand in colonial courts when English law applied here. So it can be suspended. Abraham Lincoln suspended the writ. It's a writ. That's the paper that you present of habeas corpus. Lincoln suspended the writ in the Civil War because he didn't want, if he arrested somebody for being a danger to the Union, he didn't want to have to turn him back over if you went to court anywhere in the United States. But no, there's no predicate to suspend habeas corpus. Even this depraved, conflicted, corrupt Supreme Court would not allow it. Not at first. Not at first. So that's why defending our democracies peacefully and lawfully will be so, our democratic privileges and rights will be so important in the first minutes and days and hours and months of the Trump administration. If there is one, we got to be ready. You'll need to do a daily podcast. Got to sound the alarm.
So, well, wait. Is this the optimistic version of our future, Norm? Is this really as optimistic as it gets?
Yeah, because Renato, the fundamental optimism is that every time our nation has had these fundamental and existential challenges, whether it was the failure of the Articles, I won't even start there, whether it was the 1776 overcoming overwhelming odds against the British, whether it was the failure of the Articles of Confederation and the new Constitution and President Washington. Imagine if Trump had been that first president. He would have served, 9 terms. He would have eradicated all of our freedoms. But Washington rose to the occasion. He established the template, whether it's confronting slavery and the Civil War, which could have gone either way. Gettysburg could have gone either way. The whole battle was on the Civil War was on its knife's edge, in my view, in the Battle of Gettysburg. A handful of Americans saved us that day. Whether it was the Jim Crow, the resurgence of Jim Crow, and then the civil rights movement that brought it down, World War I, World War II, my God, Hitler could have won World War II. Over and over again, taking on McCarthy or the disaster of Vietnam. Wherever you look, we've risen to the occasion. And why? That will be for a different podcast with a priest and a rabbi and an imam to explain why that has happened. But how it has happened is the genius of America somehow. Our people, our system, our values, and our structures sooner or later prove resilient in the face of evil. I think we're confronting evil. My fundamental, I'm not going to lie to you, if Trump is president, this is going to be horrible. I can't be optimistic about what that battle will be like, but I can be optimistic about the energy that the American people and the American system, our Constitution, our values will bring to that battle. And I believe that ultimately, peacefully, and through the rule of law and mobilization and talking to each other and going to court and litigating and communicating, ultimately democracy will not just endure, but will come out the other side stronger than ever.
And on that note, you want to talk about the conference?
And we're going to get together to discuss that. Asha's one of our discussants. Renato, please join us as well. July 23rd in New York City at NYU. We're having our summit, Autocracy in America, a warning and solutions. And it's an all-star cross-partisan group of people, including from every point of the political spectrum: Bill Kristol, John Dean, Asha, Joyce Vance, Alyssa Farah Griffin, wonderful, wonderful AG Keith Ellison is coming in from Minnesota. Many other wonderful speakers to sound the alarm, as we've done a little today, but also to talk about what are the solutions, what is the response. So please join us. You can find it on our website, State Democracy Defenders Action. You can sign up to come and join us. You'll hear Asha. She's on a terrific panel. I hope Renato will come as well. And we'll come up with honest, depressing analysis of the problem, but uplifting, long-term optimistic solutions of the response.
Awesome. I think it's great that you're putting that together.
Thank you for joining.
So Renato, before we go, your background looks a little bit different.
It does. I have a new job. I switched law firms. I already was at a large law firm. Now I'm at a much better law firm, I guess. I don't know, bigger, better, stronger, whatever law firm. I am in the office more as a result. I wear suits more as a result. So for everyone who wants to see my hoodie, you're not going to get to see it as often as you used to.
So has this impacted anything else for you? Yeah,
I mean, one thing I don't think everyone realized this or saw this, but I actually spent like 99% of my time practicing law. Like I would talk to you, Asha, every week in this podcast. I would be on TV for 6 minutes or 10 minutes or for 8 minutes here and there. But I spent almost all my time doing that. But now, at least in the short run, I'm going to need to focus even more on it because I'm bringing all of my practice, my clients, my whole team over to this new law firm. So I am, in the short run, not going to be talking as much on TV. So this is actually going to be my main outlet to talk to the world for the short run.
Okay. So that means that people have to keep tuning into the podcast.
100%. And, if you want to spread the word, we'll be hopefully covering a lot of topics. It's going to be an insane year, I think. So we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Cool. Do you have any other plans for the rest of the summer, or does the job mean that you're basically chained to your desk?
Yeah, I am. My wife and I are planning a December vacation. That's where we're at right now because we're just assuming that this is tough. Moving like a large practice over from one law firm to another is a lot. I've got like 40 something different matters that I'm working on right now. And
God.
And I've got a whole team. And so having to get my team over and the files, the matters and everything, it's just a lot. So I am doing my best to focus on my health, just keeping my health up and getting enough sleep and spending time with my family and my dog, Vera, who's I think probably the most important person of all.
Perfect. I am going to Costa Rica next week.
Oh my God. Look at you. What kind of life do you have, Ash? That's insane. You live like a glamorous life. I think in another world, you'd be like you'd be like one of these celebrities, like Asha spotted in Costa Rica or whatever.
It's a little glamorous. I'm going to Costa Rica next week. I'm going with my sister and her husband and 2 of her kids and my daughter.
Whoa.
So we'll be ziplining in the rainforest or whatever. And then, the one glamorous vacation that I do sort of have coming up also in December is I'm going to Antigua.
What? Wow.
Yeah. I'm going to Antigua because I went to a gala like 2 months ago, and I had a little too much wine and I bid on a vacation. And then I won it. But I'm going with a bunch of girlfriends, and Antigua is really interesting. And I'll just leave this here because they have an investment citizenship program. This is like what countries have, like where you can invest a certain amount of money and then you can, basically obtain citizenship. And Spain has it and Portugal has it. So, if you're looking for your exit strategy, but Antigua has it. And their investment threshold is $100,000, but only until July 30th.
Uh-oh.
Or 30th.
So you're getting started on your escape plan in case the apocalypse happens or the worst happens potentially in November.
Yeah. I don't know that. I've got a kid going to college and I've got another one down the line. So I don't know that I can really do it, but I'm just throwing that out. I'm trying to be helpful in this podcast to the people who are
just saying.
Just saying. But I'll report back once I go and tell you how it
sounds like fun. I'm very jealous.
MSW Media.